put on this computer. So if anybody has any objections to being on the recording tonight, just you know, state that now. If you feel like turning your video off, that's fine. And we will, when we have the discussion points, please use the reactions button down at the bottom of the screen and raise your hand so that I can call on you if I can't see you. So as I was saying, you know, a lot of these frameworks are designed to help us soften the resistance of clients and to prepare them to understand the journey that they're on. And it's not, you know, there are times when I interact with people who say that, you know, they would like to be able to go to a conference with a bunch of other hypnotherapists and do therapy in the hallways. And, you know, relieve somebody of a fear or phobia in real time, kind of in 10 or 15 minutes. And my perspective about Kappasinian hypnotherapy is that it's therapy. What you want to do is you don't want somebody to come back next year and say, you know, yeah, thank you for helping with that fear. I got a new one. Okay, or that phobia, I got a new one. Can you fix this one? And this is a point that Dr. Kappas made in the 401 series, which is that we have the problems that we have because we're suggestible to them. And this drifted on down the road over time, and the word suggestible became one of these words that I mentioned is kind of overloaded. It seems to mean different things in different contexts. And I had a great deal of difficulty kind of understanding it. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about tonight was you know, pointing out what all those different meanings are, and to get to a place where we can go back and focus on that original intention, which is that suggestibility, which we primarily think of in the initial stages as being about, you know, a guide to making suggestions, okay, in terms of E&P, receptivity to suggestions. That's only one aspect of suggestibility, and because for pedagogical purposes, that's how we're introduced to it. But as you delve more deeply into the discipline of Kappasinian hypnotherapy, what I like to do is reestablish that original kind of connotations, which is it's about helping people to be the people that they want to be. So let me start sharing my screen now. So tonight's topic is simplifying suggestibility. And as I said, this is actually at the heart of self-improvement in Kappasinian hypnotherapy. So I'm going to start this off in a terrible way because I want you all to be able to leave this meeting or this workshop and say that I punned it. So the first thing that we're going to do is do terminological hypersuggestibility. So hypersuggestibility is an overloaded word in Kappasinian therapy. Okay, and then I'm going to step back and I'm going to talk a little bit about personality, because if suggestibility causes us to have problems, it affects our personality. So we need to understand something, have some model of personality, what personality is, because ultimately what we're trying to change is the susceptibility of a personality to certain kinds of behaviors that they find to be limiting. So what I'm going to do then is talk about integrating suggestibility. So narrowing the focus of the word suggestibility and understanding the context of helping somebody create the personality or sustain the personality that they want to have. And then we're going to back up and unload, look at some of those additional meanings that came up in the initial analysis, and build a framework, okay, or a set of concepts which are new concepts, okay, that transfer over some of the content in Kappasinian hypnotherapy, just under new terminology. And I talked about this last time for those that were present in the prior meeting, which is that, you know, I use words when I'm talking about relationships, I use adventurer and protector rather than emotional and physical, for many of the same reasons that Kappas did, which is that clients find them to be really easy to understand and very intuitive. And then there'll be discussion at the end. So let's talk about hypersuggestibility. Put our capes on. So if you would, what is suggestibility? Anybody want to raise their hand and offer an idea? Okay, Stephen, go ahead.
Well, I would say it's the ability to take in information on a subconscious level so that it can change your behavior.
Okay. Amy, did you have something you wanted to share?
I'm on the same page with Steve. I would say that it's just the way that different people take information into their mind.
Okay, Emily?
If I was somebody that had no prior knowledge to how it's used, the terminology that we use it for, I would say it's how open you are to taking in suggestions from outside sources.
Okay.
I wouldn't even put together conscious, subconscious, any of that.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything? I mean, these are sophisticated answers, and they reflect very much that sense that Dr. Kappas used the term. But as we're introduced to it in the 101 course, it's a guide to hypnotic syntax. So you have this suggestibility questionnaire. It's got, what is it, 36 questions on it, I believe.
Yes.
And there's a ranking system. And based upon how people answer the questions, we have this prescription that we are supposed to use literal or inferred syntax for our suggestions. Now, obviously, this is all linked to Kappas's concepts about relationship dynamics because it's emotional and physical. In the original terminology of those, it was that the emo used emotional methods in order to, when under stress, they used emotional strategies to try to get what they want, in terms of how they worked with other people. With the phys, it was that they used physical actions and their physical characteristics in order to be able to get what they wanted from the world. Okay, but this translated as well into a set of behavior patterns about how we communicate. And there's the wonderful thing about this is that the two methods of communication and receiving information complement each other. That the physical speaks profusely and provides the emo with all kinds of information to be able to infer things, so that they can then give very literal directions to the phys that then is very happy to do what they're told to do because they're giving very specific instructions, and they're confident that once they know what to do, they can do it because they're competent at doing things. And so this is a wonderful partnership, but it's only one aspect. You get into NLP and there's a whole nother set of suggestibility criteria that have to do with whether you're visual or auditory or kinesthetic. And we're told to use certain kinds of words and to listen for certain kinds of words in the way that people speak so that we can formulate suggestions to be able to get past their defenses, okay, or to make them more susceptible to what it is that we're saying. And one of the things that we can find ourselves doing, and I do quite a lot, is she's an emo, don't say you, don't refer to her body. There's all kinds of little tripwires that you can get involved with in this. And so one of the things that if you read Gilligan's book, what he said about his work as a therapist when he was studying under Dr. Erickson was that he was constantly doing this. He was always thinking about, I understand what the problem is, now what do I need to say, and thinking about the syntax and the language structure and everything like that. And what Dr. Erickson told him when he said that he was having trouble with therapy was that you tend to partition too much and it impedes your effectiveness as a therapist. Or it wasn't the partition, it was compartmentalized was the word that Erickson used, okay? Which is that this constant thinking about syntax gets in the way of actually producing the hypnotic experience, which is most valuable to the client. There's also the sense when you look at that chart that Dr. Kappas has of this session and how it unfolds and how you're creating overload, and you go into the arm raising, it's going up and up and up and up and up. And the terminology that we use is when your hand touches your face, you will reach the peak of your suggestibility and go into trance. Okay, and so there's different levels of trance that we're taught about. And some of this has to do with what Amy and Steve were talking about, which is that the depth of trance has to do with access to the deeper functions of the mind. So at the hypnagogic level, you're up at the emotional kind of a state. Catatonic, you're beginning to interact with basic muscular functions. You go down into somnambulism and you're dealing with some really deep metabolical pain sensations, things like that. You can get down. So this level of hypnotic depth is related to the issue of suggestibility. Okay. But the thing that can happen when we focus on this meaning of the word is we get involved with technique over efficacy. And you see a lot of this in new therapists, which is that there's really this focus on how do I hypnotize people? How do I get them in deep? You know, how do I make them most suggestible? Okay. Now you get into, and they'll collect all kinds of hypnotics, inductions and deepeners and things like that. Now you look at some of this more advanced practitioners in the Ericksonian method, and they'll go with an experienced client. And Erickson had this perspective, which is that you had to have 20 hours of hypnotic training with a client before you did any serious work with them. Okay, which, you know, I would love to be able to spend 20 hours with somebody just getting them hypnotized and conditioned for hypnosis. That would be a real nice practice, make good money doing that. But the thing is that he was doing this in an academic setting and he needed people for his students to practice on. So I guess it was kind of okay. But what these people write eventually is they would just put their clients down on the couch and say, hey, or in the chair and say, hey, this is what we're going to work on today. Now just find the right depth. Just find the depth that you feel is right. Okay. And then the last thing that has to do with presenting issue persistence. Okay. You know, you got to drive your car. You got to get from point A to point B. Okay. Yeah, you had a little accident. You're afraid to make left turns. You know it's hurting you. Why can't you let go of this? Okay. And so this has to do with suggestibility to yourself, which is an aspect which isn't necessarily contained in what was said before. Okay. Your environment creates overload in this crisis. The personality destabilizes. The subconscious comes out into the waking world and takes over and does things for you in order to keep you alive. Then it goes back in and you calm down and the conscious mind comes back out and is managing things. But the subconscious realizes that it's been exposed in a catastrophic way and that the outcome could have been deadly. And so it becomes defensive and it ruminates up on the experience and brings it up again and again and again. And you find this in dream studies. The sufferers of trauma have these dreams where the subconscious every night in dreams is trying to figure out what could we have done differently. And this leaks out into the waking mind. This affects our capacity to sleep soundly and things like that, but it leaks out into other circumstances. Whenever there's any association with that event, it may have been that they were having a soft serve cone at the time that the building fell down, whatever the heck it was, you know. And they see a soft serve cone, okay, and that sets them off. So this is suggestibility to the self. And here we get involved with discovery, which is you can't necessarily understand exactly why what's happening is happening with your client. You identify the syndrome that they're concerned about, you look for triggers, and you may potentially want to go all the way on down to cause in order to remove the root problem that is causing the subconscious to be focused and ruminate upon this issue. And if you don't take care of this, you get into therapeutic whack-a-mole, like I talked about at the conferences. where, yeah, you solve one problem in the shoulder and then it's in the knee the next time, okay? And they come back and then they got pain in their knee, you got to deal with that, okay? So when Dr. Kappas is talking about changing suggestibility, this is really important in terms of what we achieve for our clients. We are helping them to reorganize and rebalance their personality in a way that they don't get those follow-on syndromes. They are no longer suggestible to those kinds of problems. So it goes beyond, you know, as you say, there's this, as Amy and you know talked about, there's this receptivity to information and processing in a certain way that causes behaviors, okay? And what Dr. Kappas, I believe, was fundamentally talking about when we talked about suggestibility was shifting that kind of receptivity so that you had an effective response to that stimulus, as opposed to allowing it to be internalized and to create difficulties within your entire system, the entire system of the person, which is what's mediated by the subconscious. Okay, does this all make sense? Anybody have any questions on this?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead, Steve.
Somehow I missed what we have to take care of to prevent therapeutic whack-a-mole. I was taking notes and listening
We have
to
to
you, and I
change
don't
their
know what you mean.
we have to change their suggestibility.
Oh, okay. Now,
This is the third meaning of the word suggestibility, which is it's about the structure of the personality. Okay, there's an implication that the reason that we have specific problems is because there are structures in our personality that cause us to interpret information or sensations in a certain way. Okay, and so this is what we have to change.
You have to change it, you're not talking about changing it from adventurer to protector or vice versa, or to somnambulist. You're talking about something else?
Right. Right. See, adventure and protector, or emo and fizz, is just an example of this deeper kind of suggestibility. Okay, and this is why emos and fizzes drive each other crazy in relationships, is because they push each other into corners. When the fizz gets tired of sitting at home on the couch every night and says, I'm going to go out and have an adventure, I'm going to go dress up sexy and go out with my friends, now the emo gets nervous and anxious, okay, and feels that they're being pushed around. So, okay, fine, go off by yourself. I'm going to go in the garage and work on my boat or whatever the heck it is, you know. And so they just and so now the fizz comes home and sees they're working on their boat every single night, you know, and so they feel like they're being rejected. He doesn't want to be with me anymore, whatever the heck. Okay, so this is just an example. That whole thing of sexuality and the dynamic of sexuality and how relationships fall apart is all about suggestibility. When you break it down, it's about this deeper kind of suggestibility.
So when you change their suggestibility, what are you changing it to? That's what I seem to be missing.
Okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about that process, because what he does in relationship therapy is he explains to people about complementarity and says you chose each other for a reason. For your own good, you chose to be with this person.
You're talking about Kappas or Erickson?
Kappas, yeah, well, all of them. You know, if you this is also in the relationship therapy section of the 301 and the 201.
Yeah.
Okay, you explain to people their complementarity. You're teaching them how to respond to the situation rather than react to it. Yes, Amy.
Can you tell me what you mean by the structures of their personality? Are you referring to what NLP would call filters or distortions?
Okay, let's go there. What is personality? Good question. I like that question. Okay. What is personality? Come on, let's hear it, people. Amy, you got your hand up. You volunteered. Or you forgot to take it down, I don't know.
I
She's
forgot
taking
to
it
take it down.
down. Okay.
But I'll take a whack without a mole at it.
Okay.
I mean, I think personality is probably an accumulation of both learned and inherent, inherent, I don't know what the word I want is here, characteristics or traits combined with the cumulative experiences you've had and the way you in particular process and organize those experiences.
Yes, Allie.
That's my guess, my off the cuff guess.
That's good, Amy. That's good. That was, I'm going to comment about that soon, but it's a very interesting migration of intellectual migration that was in that answer there. So I'll get back to that. Yes, Allie.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go a step back because there was something about the other portion that I wanted
Sure.
to say, and I hope I don't get you off the subject, but it was interesting when you were talking about self, the talking to the self. For the first time in my life, during this whole process, I questioned myself, do I talk infer to myself or do I talk direct? And I realized the stories and everything that goes on in my life, they might be inferred, but when I'm really talking to my higher self, and when I'm really in touch with that and I'm giving myself a command or doing something to change, I am talking directly to myself. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Sure.
Because I think that was interesting. As far as personality, I love the way Dr. Joe Dispenza puts it all. How do we create our identity? It all starts with our thoughts. Now, it could be spoken, it could be just reactions, it could be NLP, getting it from all sorts of sensory. But eventually that creates an emotion. That emotion that you act on, once you act on it enough times to create the right pathways towards it, that becomes some part of your personality, which eventually repeated over and over becomes your identity.
Right.
Talking about it in sense of what we've learned in school, I don't see that much difference. I mean, I know this is controversial, but personality and sexuality are the same thing for me. I think in a lot of ways, going back to Kappas's videos, I realized, he wasn't talking about really changing suggestibility to that extent. It was maybe 1 degree or more, going from 65 to 64, that sort of thing. And ultimately, the goal is, first of all, you got to find out what are the congruencies. Are you a congruent emo, the sexuality and suggestibility?
Okay, well, we're going on way down the road here into Kappasinian theory. Okay, and so what I'm hearing you say is that personality. You're talking about how personality is formed.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's leads into how we process experience. Anybody else have anything they want to share here?
Yeah,
Yes, Emily.
So I would like to believe that it's like the movie, if anyone's seen it, the movie Soul, that's for kids. I absolutely love that whole concept of how these little souls, these like new souls are the, if anyone has seen it, they kind of collect their different parts of their personality before they even come to Earth. I do know that, like, of course, like upbringing and how you're raised and so many factors do play a major role in your personality. But I'd like to believe that we're kind of, depending on what you believe, I kind of believe that before you even come to this planet, you already kind of have this personality, these different parts that make you you.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting idea. Okay, you go back and think about where this word came from. Personality. So you incarnate, if you believe in such things. You incarnate and you have in your incarnated form certain problems that you have to solve. And how you go about solving those problems to express to become meaningful in the world. Okay. That's part of your personality. Okay. That's part of being a person. Yes, Steve.
To me, personality is your external representation of your internal individuality.
Okay. So the thing that we as therapists have to do, though, is we have to deal with that external representation. Okay, we can't know what's going on internally unless we get in real deep with our clients, and then we've got all kinds of other issues we've got to manage very carefully, which is maintaining separation between them and us. Okay.
You know, it just occurred to me that external personal that external representation could be fake. I knew a
Right.
guy. I knew a guy at
Defenses.
karaoke who I thought he was obnoxious, and only when he was depressed did I like him. He was always, "Hey, how are you?" You know, and he told me, he says, "I wanted to be in with Brian's group, so I created this character that I play here." And I liked him when he was down. Now, that's not who I am. I don't like people because they're sad. But with him, I just thought he was so obnoxious when he was happy and glad handing everybody, that I saw who he really was
Right.
when he let down those defenses and talked from his heart.
Right. Okay, so let's move on to this. Our personality is how we navigate reality. So let me give an example here. And some of you might recognize this is a mashup of two philosophical conundrums. So what is the sound of one tree falling in the neighborhood? So the first thing is perception. We hear a crack and a crash. And then we go through a process of interpretation. Is that a tree falling on a house? Or is it two separate events? Or is it just some noise? We prioritize. Is it my house? Do I need to do something about this right now? And then we have processes. The first of them is very instinctual at the level of the very primitive processes of survival and procreation. So the reaction will be run away, or we have some kind of considered response where the conscious mind steps in and has a moment to say, what are the consequences of the actions that we're going to take? How do we prepare to manage this situation in the most effective way? So the response is to grab my wallet, keys, and cell phone first. So this is what this is what I believe, and you know, as Amy was going on, it was kind of very interesting how she moved from this kind of process, and some of this has happened in some of the comments, this process of how we form our behavior patterns to actually how they manifest in the world. And this is focused in a situation which doesn't involve other people. But the same thing happens when you have other people in the room with you, okay? You have perceptions, and emos get overwhelmed because they have to interpret and prioritize everything before they come up with a process. They're constantly analyzing everything, and so the process is always to analyze. So this loop is running very, very fast with them all the time. They become exhausted, and they have to step away from the room, okay? While the Fizz doesn't deal with a lot of interpretation. They are just in there doing it. They go from perception to prioritize, and they process. Okay. So these different strategies for how we go about it, and the emphasis that we put in these different areas, I'm going to suggest is a good way of thinking about our personality. And it's actually how our personality manifests in the world. And this is also in some sense in NLP. We have input coming from the world. We interpret it through our filters. I'm adding the prioritization, okay? And what we're doing in therapy, okay, is trying to influence all these things, but the guide to whether we've succeeded or not is the process. It's the behavior. We are behavioralists. Does the client go up in front of the microphone and freeze? Or do they stay in awareness of what they're trying to accomplish and start their speech? Do they respond or do they react? But in order to do that, we have to address all aspects of this situation. Now, I just want to remind people who weren't, you might, if you know, this may be the first time you've seen this, is that our subconscious manages our conditioned reactions. And there's two kinds of conditioned reactions. And I'm very precise in my use of these terms. They're not interchangeable. Reaction means it's a subconscious, it's being processed in the subconscious, okay? And classically, what we do is you've got a stimulus that produces a response, that show the dog some dog food. You have a second stimulus, which is the bell, that doesn't cause the dog to salivate. But if you ring the bell when you present the food, the dog will still salivate. And eventually, if you do it enough times, you'll ring the bell and the dog will salivate. And this is just an association that is established, okay, between stimuli. This is how we learn to breastfeed and things like that. Okay, very, very simple kinds of conditioning when we're small infants. Then there's operant situations where you say, okay, if you want, I want you to get an A, and if you get an A in social studies, we'll go to Disneyland, okay? And the child just has got a bunch of resources and they explore them and they figure out how to utilize them to get an A. Okay, they don't design the process, they kind of figure out as they're going along. The classical case for this in the animal kingdom is you've got a bunch of bananas in the stool. The bananas are hung high up in the ceiling, and you got a stick. And the chimpanzee figures out to get up on the stool and reach up with the stick and knock the bananas off the bunch so that you can have a banana. Okay, this is not something where the monkey went and reasoned it out and did measurements and things like that and drew drawings and wrote a procedure and everything like that. It was just, there was just stuff lying around, and you know, he picked up the stick and was waving around and he saw the bananas and eventually realizes that, you know, maybe I can knock a banana with this thing, okay? But it's not done by first principles. Now,
could you go back a page? I'm still taking notes. I'll be done in a moment. Right there.
sure,
No, not that
Okay.
one, the next one. Subconscious conditioned reactions.
right.
I just have to type reward reward cost. I mean, right. Okay, resources. Okay, let me write the last one. What is
These will be on.
enemy?
These will be on. I'll have these up on the on my Facebook page after this is over. So.
Okay, well, great. What is enemy?
Enemy is a situation where you just believe that there's no solution. So what happens is you'll have rats in a cage, rats in 2 cages, okay? And there'll be shocks. But in one cage, the rat can go over and push a button and he knows the shocks will stop for some time. In another cage, there is no such button. You give the rats the same number of shocks. It's just that the rat knows when he pushes the button, there'll be some time when he won't get a shock. He has some control. What happens is the rat that's in the cage with the button will be fine. He will have adapted. The rat that's in the cage without the button will lie on the floor of the cage and just quiver. That's enemy. You're paralyzed. This is a very important concept in long-term trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is why people identify with their tormentor, because they are completely incapable of understanding how to operate without their tormentor being present.
So what's that? The syndrome. I'm thinking Scandinavia. What is it? The
Stockholm syndrome, yeah.
Stockholm syndrome, right?
Right. And then conscious chosen responses, this is important to understand as well, because what happens is that Kappas upholds logic, reason, analysis, decision-making, and willpower. But there's actually 2 ways that we come up with our chosen responses. Design, which is the ones that the Kappas emphasizes. Theory, planning, execution is nice because there's predictability. It's either going to succeed or fail, you know. But you know one way or the other when you're done. Okay. But most people don't live their life this way, because smart people like Dr. Kappas keep on making up complicated rules to follow. and obviously because they're smart people, they are able to process rule systems that are more complicated than a lot of people can. So most people live by story. They see movies or they read a book and they really identify with one of the characters. And so they go around looking for that frog that's going to turn into the prince. Or they're that ugly duckling that someday will be recognized for their worth. And the thing that's nice about stories is they're very, very flexible. You can change your story on a dime, just based upon the kind of people that you find yourself with. And so this is, you know, when I think about therapeutic imagery, this is part of why that's an important innovation. Okay, is it allows people, especially if you go into the mythic and archetypal imagery, it allows people to make their own story. It's part of why that's so powerful. But what happens is that we have to continually validate what we're doing here. This takes a fair amount of effort. And that's the introspective work that we do. That's how the conscious mind maintains dialogue with our behavior, is by this constant process of validation. That takes a lot of work. And what happens over time, because it takes so much work, is that when we get our strategies down and kind of they're repetitive and working, the subconscious takes them over for us. So we can think about what happened. We can think about, you know, our wedding anniversary and where we're going to take our spouse on our wedding anniversary while we're driving down the road, and we missed a turn off, but we don't have an accident. The subconscious is driving for us. It's pressing the pedals, whatever the heck needs to happen, and we're able to think about these other things. This is known. So conscious chosen responses eventually become reactions. Now, navigation, the way that we navigate reality has all kinds of side effects. They're the circumstances that we're in. They're the capabilities that we have by competing against people that have similar skill levels to us or collaborating with them. So we're able to do things that we never could do by ourselves because of the way that we navigate. And our character, we're in a difficult relationship. We may become more aggressive than we really want to be, or we may become very passive in the future. And if we have ineffective strategies in one area, we eventually find ourselves compensating because organically we still need to survive and procreate. So if we've got emotional blocks inside of our personality, where we don't prioritize our emotions, we say that they're not important, we ignore them. Eventually we have physical illness that we have to pay attention to. This is the source of body syndromes. The whole theory of body syndromes revolves around this. Not paying attention to some aspect of the personality, deprioritizing, that pops up in another area. We have to compensate for that. Career and social can be very important. Okay. Dale Carnegie was looking at all those poor geniuses sitting in their offices, never talking to anybody, nobody appreciating them. Said, you got to go out and be a go-getter, a glad-hander, get people to agree with you, how to get to yes. And convince people that, you know, if you don't make the right, you got to change the way you are socially in order to have career success. You got to compensate. And so you have a lot of people who are emos, as Kappas always taught, learn to behave like physicists, and it wears them out. Creates emotional problems for them that manifest as physical problems, okay? So what we're leading to is this idea of personality I've presented. It leads naturally to what? To suggestibility to problems. This is what Kappas is getting at. Because we have reactions going on inside of us, gained from past experience, and the world's changing around of us because we're navigating around in it, increasing our capabilities, and our character is changing, those reactions deep within us no longer serve us. And we have to go in and figure out, have a conversation with the subconscious mind to say, you know, this is hurting us. Let's do something different. Let's try something different and see how it goes. Right? So we're getting them back into a mode where we are getting them to be responsive to their situation. And that can be done two ways. Kappas focused on logic, analysis, reason, decision-making, and willpower. But it can also be done by changing their story, which is a big part of what the mental bank does. Okay, just changing your story, changing the narrative that you're living. When we need to be flexible in terms of how we go about doing that. So let's look now at hypnotherapy. Here's a suggestion for what hypnotherapeutic suggestibility is. In terms of the work that we do, it's the degree to which goals can be realized by replacing reactions with responses. Okay, so this has got two parts to it. This seems kind of counterintuitive, but there's a problem. Why we have problems, this addresses why we have problems. Reactively doing what we always do no longer serves us. And we're in relationships that compensate for or exploit limiting reactions. So our relationships don't work for us. They cause tension for us. But it's also how hypnotherapy solves our problems. The subconscious mind will accept alternatives when they are ratified by the conscious mind. That's why the subconscious created the conscious mind, was to figure out how to survive in the social world. And if the conscious mind says this is right, the subconscious will go with it. Sigmund Freud found this out. He didn't explain to his patients why he was making the suggestions he was making when he had them in trance. He simply told them, you will start doing this. He never explained, he never laid any foundation in the conscious mind. And what happened was, the reason why psychotherapists did not do hypnotherapy for like 70 or 80 years, while they poo-pooed it and said it was worthless, is because Freud found out that all of his clients began to resist his suggestions. Who is this guy pushing us around? We know how to survive. We've gotten this far. What does he know? You know, and if you don't prepare the foundation in the conscious mind, the subconscious will ultimately reject the suggestions. This is part of the problem with aversion therapy and why I avoid it. You tell the subconscious mind that the cigarette is poo-poo. Okay. What happens is that the woman goes out to dinner with a friend of hers and her friend lights up a cigarette and she throws up on her blouse. Truth. Known case history. Okay. You don't create conflict between the conscious and subconscious mind. You want consistency between the two of them. Okay. But the other thing is that self-improvement, and this is so profound in what Kappas in this definition of hypnotherapy. I'm sorry, it's also, so you need to add to this also, the organic well-being improves. The subconscious feels better in the body and recognizes that the body is becoming stronger and more fit. Okay. So instead of having to compensate for your laziness, it's able to organize energy to help you be successful in other areas of your life. Okay. Be more competitive in the world. So what this means is that self-improvement, this is why Kappas, I think, chose self-improvement. It trumps social acceptance. You start doing what feels right for you, rather than being susceptible to pressure from other people. Now, if somebody comes to us and they don't have this capacity to look at what they're doing and kind of think about it and understand it and begin to have the strength to be able to choose a new direction, In the 401 series, Kappas would say that there are people whose personalities are simply too weak. There's not enough content in their personalities, and you cannot do therapy with them. This is part of his philosophy. I think that you have to go back and start looking at how they perceive things. Are they focused on, what kinds of things are they focused on? What kinds of things are they paying attention to? Is it mostly how they feel in their body when they need to be, thinking logically or reasoning about things, taking in information in other forms? Okay, which enables them to have a broader context for their lives and anticipate what other people are going to be. How do you go about doing this? Okay, but it's a lot of work, and it costs too much money for most of them. Yes, Amy.
Can you say more about what you just said, that Kappas said some minds were too weak or devoid of content?
No, but he would say there was this case where he was working with this woman that had, I think in modern terms, borderline personality disorder. So she didn't know enough about who she was for him to be able to reason with her about who she wanted to become. Okay, and that was the specific case history that came up in the 401 series, where he was just working with this woman who had borderline personality. She had no real self-concept, and because she had no self-concept, she could not imagine what to do to change her situation in life, because she didn't understand herself. She didn't know her own self.
So was that a way of saying when there's a mental illness, disorder, whatever, that's the issue? I mean,
No, this is a specific type. I mean, he treated people with
thing,
right. But he would treat schizophrenics. He would say that schizophrenia, I mean, it's just like insomnia or deep trance, where you can have positive and negative hallucinations. Okay, if you don't dream for long enough, you start having waking hallucinations. Okay, and he was very comfortable working with schizophrenics.
Okay.
So it wasn't necessarily that it was a clinical disorder. It was an assessment that he had about whether or not there was enough understanding, self-understanding in the client to be able to talk about changing themselves. And my attitude towards that is that the self-concept then becomes the topic of therapy. You don't start with trying to change their behaviors. You start with trying to build a self-concept that they believe in. What are your qualities of character that you are most proud of? You've gotten this far in life. How have you done it? What have you stood upon that's helped you to make decisions? Well, I'm loyal to my mother. Loyalty. Okay, let's start with loyalty and begin building that self-understanding. Yes, Laura.
So maybe too off topic, but I know you were talking about earlier, I got cut out for a little while, but how do you know when you need to go to the deeper root issue based on when they come in with behavior and when you should go deeper?
I mean,
Does
going
that
for
have to do
cause,
with
going
yeah,
for cause?
going for the root cause, yeah. Versus just dealing with the superficial behavior itself.
Okay, so the whole issue here is this is the degree to which goals can be. It's you're talking about hypnotherapeutic suggestibility, and whether their problem can be solved without going to and explaining to them this is where this came from.
Okay.
Okay, so this is what you do. This is what you do. I will go to stages of development, and I'll listen to their terminology and how they're talking about themselves. And I will go to stages of development, and I'll say, look here in the stages of development, was there something that happened around this age in your life? Okay. And they may say, I don't want to talk about that. And I've had people say, I don't want to talk about that. Okay, boom, cut that off. They are not suggestible to that. But I go back and I say, okay, so you've made it this far. What are the strengths that have enabled you to get to this point? And that's where I
good.
start. I focus on their strengths.
Yep. Thank
And
you.
they're suggestible to that, to expanding those strengths. So again, it's all about figuring out how to get how to get past their reactions and getting the conscious mind involved in terms of counseling themselves. So let me see here. So this is what I think the goal of Kappasinian therapy is. Okay, it's to empower the client to be more suggestible to the self, to the conscious mind, to their social identity. And we'll come back to this in a little while. Okay. But I mentioned stages of development and how important this is, okay, as a tool. I don't see people discussing this nearly enough when I look at the discussion sections. Okay. Because what you have here is character, right? You have people, this is a model for expanding the context, capability, and character. This is a model of the evolutionary of personality. Okay, and so you've got trust, autonomy, initiative, industry, identity, intimacy, gender, all these qualities of character, and then in the growing context in which they are expressed. And the difficulties that arise if we can't learn how to manifest a personality, to interact with the world in a way that allows us to succeed in this context. What are the challenges that we have in our personality? And what happens is that because we're compensating constantly through every single stage for the things that we failed with in the past, we get this layering of suggestibility where we may have to hit inferiority first before we can get down to shame. Yes, Amy.
I'm sorry to interrupt if you're on a particular train of thought, but I'm very new. I haven't graduated yet. I've completed classes, so I've only seen pro bono, and I still feel, after a year of classes, a little bit of confusion around our scope and our limitations with scope. And I think this is really interesting that you're talking about stages of development, because certainly there are things within our curriculum that I felt like they're presenting because they want us to know, but not being psychologists, where do we draw the line? And at least in my perception, the emphasis was so strongly on you work with what the client wants to experience in hypnotherapy. So I find myself struggling with this a little bit in terms of how you would apply it if you're seeing somebody, for example, stuck in a stage of development, or as a hypnotherapist, not a psychologist.
Okay, so what is the issue as you understand it with scope? For us as practitioners, what is the issue? What is the concern?
I guess I use the word scope, and I'm not using that like with legal liability, but just simply what we're qualified to do. And it was hammered so much into us that you don't share your opinion, you don't share what you see. So my perception is that a psychologist, if you go to a psychologist for counseling and you're expressing a problem, they might say, I'd like you to consider that perhaps your sense of inferiority is coming from this experience that you had when you were 8. And my perception of HMI is that we're not supposed to be doing that as hypnotherapists. We're not qualified to do that. We're supposed to be saying to them, oh, you have this problem with feeling inferior. Well, how would you like to feel? Okay, let's suggest that in hypnotherapy. Very simplistic and frankly difficult for me to keep myself limited to. It's so tempting to tell people these insights, but they've just hammered over and over that the client has to get there themselves.
Okay, there's things to go on there, okay, which is that if the presenting issue is a defense and you remove it by simply saying stop feeling inferior, but it's a defense that's lying on top of mistrust from the very earliest stages of their life, where something really terrible happened. And you pulled the Band-Aid off, which is the defense of the compensation of their inferiority. Bad things will happen. Okay. So what happens is you never remove a defense before you have a replacement. And what I always focus on in terms of managing this issue is it's a change in their character, something that they believe that they can accomplish when or experience some sense of pride in themselves. Okay, and I think that's a very powerful replacement. Okay, is for them to feel pride in themselves. Okay, and so I quite often work with that as the substitute, but it unfolds in its own time, and it can take a lot of time when it's a defense before they get to the point of accepting this pride in themselves, okay, as a replacement for their inferiority. But that then becomes the foundation upon which they can begin to peek at that, whatever caused that mistrust. You don't
are you in that instance saying to them, I think that your sense of inferiority relates to this thing that happened when you were...
No, I don't know that. That hasn't been revealed to me yet. The inferiority is a defense. Okay, they may not even know that there was this mistrust thing going on from their infancy. Okay, but the thing is that we always operate in that mode. Okay, so the issue with clinical scope is diagnosis according to the DSM. We can't do that. We are not competent to do that. So if somebody comes and tells us, I'm depressed. Okay. Have you been to a psychologist, a psychotherapist? You've been to a psychiatrist? Do they say that you're depressed? No, I just feel depressed. Okay, it's not a clinical term. Okay. So what we say is, well, I can't help you with depression per se because I can't diagnose it. But how's that affecting your life? And they start saying, well, I have this thing that I can't do. I have that thing I can't do because I'm lacking motivation. Okay, well, which of these is most important to you? Let's change that. We focus on changing behavior. The psychiatrist or the psychotherapist looking at that situation has the authority to say, you're in real trouble. You have suicidal ideation. You need to be in protective custody. I'm going to order you to go to the hospital. We can't do that. So there are certain issues that come up in therapy that we have to recognize, and this is that list that Lisa Mackenberg hands out. If these issues come up in therapy, we have got to call somebody up and say, this person needs help that I can't provide. Okay. And most of the time, what it has to do is harm to self or others. So if somebody is actively behaving in a way which is causing harm to themselves or others. So I was in a recent situation where I was dealing with somebody who called me up and said they were depressed, and I asked them, went through this whole analysis and got to the point where I knew what we could focus on within scope. And I sent them an email to schedule for the next session because they said they needed to check their calendar. I sent them an email and a follow-up email and another email, and I called them and left text messages for a week and a half, and they didn't respond to any of them. I called the emergency contact and said, I have not heard from this person. How are they doing? This may be out of scope. I may have to stop working with your daughter. This is a situation where this is a self-care issue. She's come to me for help. She said she's depressed in a kind of a non-clinical kind of a way. But she wasn't responding to me. Then it gets serious. Then I've got to go and get help. It's out of scope for me. Okay. So if it gets to the point where somebody can't care for themselves effectively, then I think that we get into a situation where we have got to get other people involved. It's out of scope for us. But as long as they are able to say, this is what I want to do, and they can tell you, yeah, I've done that or not. Okay, I can do that now or not. then it's self-improvement. If they define what the goals of the therapy are, and they are the ones responsible for saying when they've done it and you're done succeeding. I always tell my clients this, I will never tell you you're done with therapy. You tell me. Okay, that's hypnotherapy. If you need somebody to tell you when you're better, you need a psychotherapist. Okay, I can't do that for you. You tell me. All right.
Okay, so then that leads to the part where how do you identify when it's a defense?
Okay. So what happens is the defenses are usually neurotic, which means that you point out to them, you know, this is not working for you, and they give you all kinds of reasons why they have to do it. They may make no freaking sense. Okay, you're just listening to them going off, and you're just saying, I don't see the connection here, but you know, you don't pass judgment. You know, you try to keep a calm, compassionate face and everything like that, and not reveal anything to them. You know, always projecting positive thoughts towards your client. Okay, and it just doesn't make any sense. They're unwilling to change. And a rational explanation as to why it would benefit them to change just runs into a stone wall. That's usually how you know it's a defense. Okay. But there's also behavior patterns in terms of how they talk about other people. And you'll get to you will have a course at some point in time on defenses. And you'll get this list. I may have it in here later on. I think I may have had it in the prior presentations, what the defenses are, but we may get to that today. Okay.
Yeah,
but there's
I'm
also
done with classes and I don't remember that, so I'm sure I just
right.
blank that out. But
okay, so this is why I'm proposing this whole thing about personality and suggestibility, hypnotherapeutic suggestibility. It's because it ties into these other tools and makes it really clear why stages of development is pure freaking gold, and never ignore it. Kappas always in the 401 series said stages of development. Try to figure out whether, just given what we know about the consequences of failure, you know roughly when it happened. Ask questions, okay, about that time of their lives. All right. The challenge with stages of development, it's complicated. Okay, it's a very rich model, but it's well worth mastering. Okay, and I'm, you know, as I discussed last time, I'm also in this perspective of the system that we're working with. Again, is you got society outside your thinking mind, which is trying to figure out the rules, and it builds this social identity, this concept of I, which is the external personality. And there's this critical mind, and underneath are all our knowns and unknowns, which are sorted according to the emotions of euphoria and fear. We're trying to maintain balance between these things to assure our survival. But there's this powerful drive to procreate. And one of the big issues that we have in dealing with our clients is that this drive gets turned on after the critical mind comes into place. And so negotiating about sex, even within the self, you are guaranteed with most of your clients that they will have ineffective reactions in their personality that need to be exposed and talked about. And this is why E and P is so important. Because there's that fundamental contradiction in expectations that goes back to the relationship with the primary caregiver. And we get involved with the people we do because they satisfy those expectations. But what happens is that those expectations are down at the organic level. And when society starts telling us, you spent too much money, we're going to cancel your credit cards. Okay. Well, we start saying, what should we do about this? Okay. And then we start saying, well, I've survived in society acting the way that I do. So how come you think that I'm going to listen to you tell me I need to do something different? And so we create these disconnects our reactions get exposed in a social context that are totally, completely incompatible. And that's why emos and fizzes drive each other crazy when crisis hits. So this is very important for the same reason. So stages of development in EMP are really powerful tools for that thing of preparing the conscious mind to validate to the subconscious that the suggestions that are being made are important and will be supported and validated by the conscious mind when they are performed. Yes, Laura.
So we were talking earlier also about how related to the EMP and why people get together. So I know complementary was brought up, but can it also be something like from the past where they're reliving experiences or patterns that are maybe dysfunctional from their childhood and parents and related to that kind of stuff?
Yes, although
And
there's
how would that play into EMP, I guess, you know?
Yeah, and part of what goes on there is, I'm sad to say, you know, there's positive complementarity and there's negative complementarity.
Okay, yeah,
Again,
all right.
again,
That
what
makes
Kappas
sense.
talks about is you may fear the experience that you're about to have, but you know how to
Mhm.
survive it.
Mhm.
And you've been convinced that you're not worthy of having a healthy relationship.
Mhm.
And so you just have to go with what it is that you're capable of receiving.
Yeah, I see it a lot
Right.
in therapy with, yeah.
It
Mhm.
is so painful.
Yeah.
And again, that's why for me, it is a defense. Okay. This self-rejection is a defense. And the thing that's so hard is that a lot of these people cannot afford to do 20 or 30 sessions of therapy where you're simply encouraging them to believe in themselves again and again and again, and hear them saying again and again and again, but I'm not good enough for this. And you just keep on saying, you know, how do you feel about the changes, that the investment you're making in yourself? Don't you feel that you're making, you know, your perspective on life is changing, you know? And it takes a long time to do that. It takes a lot of patience to work with people on that. So thank you for raising it. Yes, Steve.
Brian, I want to ask about your choice of the word euphoria. I consider myself to be a very happy person. I've got, you know, happiness, joy, contentment, not a lot of intense excitement and wee. That's how I think of euphoria, intense excitement, being on a roller coaster, you're going down. Why not? I mean, I think I don't have much excess dopamine, but plenty of serotonin, sometimes some oxytocin. Why euphoria and not happiness?
Because it's the same kind of a concept. You've got a dichotomy. Okay. So nobody is 100% emo and nobody is 100% fizz. The emo would never get out of bed in the morning, starve to death because they would run out of food tasters. Okay. The fizz would jump off the cliff just to know what it felt like to fly. Okay. So you can't be either one way or the other. And so these words are supposed to evoke the extremes, to emphasize the fact that we need balance. We need to come into balance. So
I
that's
guess
why
I
I
saw
chose those words.
euphoria as a more extreme term than fear. I guess fear
It
can
may be. It
certainly
may
be
be.
extreme, but you know,
Right.
I
It may be.
might fear uh, going on a job interview or an audition or something and not be terrified. But euphoria just seems like very, very extreme to me.
Well, the thing that's very important about euphoria is that it is the context for deep social bonding. Okay. You feel that you can absolutely trust the situation you're in, and you completely stop defending yourself.
Oh, so you're defining euphoria differently than I do. Okay.
Yeah, euphoria has to do with, for me, and it goes beyond happiness in this sense. Okay, what I'm thinking of when, and it may be that I'm going out of the clinical definition of euphoria, and maybe if I'm bumping into somebody else's definition, then I should be more careful about that. You know, certainly I can't protest against that criticism, because this is what I'm doing to John Kappas right now.
Sure. Well, words are tough. You know, they
Right.
mean different things to
Right.
different people.
Right,
What are you
right. But
gonna do?
the thing is here is that fear puts you into a situation where you don't interact with people. You're afraid to
Yeah.
engage with reality. Euphoria is a situation where you're just taking everything in, and everything is good, and you stop protecting yourself. Okay, so this is you know, this is the person, you know, this is the person who gets sucked in by the honeypot and hauled off to some, you know, to some programming, you know, CIA programming center, or KGB programming center, or whatever the heck, you know, and they end up getting it's that kind of a thing. Okay, where you stop defending yourself, and this is quite often what happens with sex. Okay, this
Well,
is what
certainly there's a lot of trust in sex. Now, euphoria, certainly there's a lot of oxytocin. And okay, maybe oxytocin can create euphoria, but it also can create a warm kind of
yeah. And
love.
the thing that I'm trying to avoid here, okay, is I'm trying to neurotransmitter functionality is incredibly complicated.
Mhm.
And we tend to focus on like 5 or 6 or 7 of them, but there's more than 100 neurotransmitters in the brain. We tend to focus on the things that the pharmacologists know how to create agonist and antagonist for, because they can sell that, you know. But in point in fact, the brain is enormously complicated. Neurochemically, it's just enormously complicated.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tend to characterize it, and this thing where I'm looking at the critical issue of personality being our relationship with society, and the fact that this block between the conscious and subconscious creates incompatible realms of experience, one of which is driven by childhood, and the other one of which is attempting to constantly expand the scope of its influence in society. That creates this terrible inconsistency that is very difficult to resolve.
So you're saying who you are and who you want to be?
No, I'm talking about what you do and how you are. Okay, and it's you have an external facing personality that interacts with society, and we're totally dependent upon society. This again goes back to the last presentation. When we took over the world about 2,000 years ago, and that number reflects how many people were actually dependent upon agriculture to survive, and were spending their time thinking about influencing other people's behavior. Okay, about 2,000 years ago, there was a tipping over where we began to focus almost completely on politics, you know, and a lot of what we do in our lives, so that we can get things from other people. The question now then became, it's not what's happening in the world around us, is this person my friend or my enemy? Everything is colored by this judgment about the person that you're interacting with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but underneath there is still the fundamental organic reality, which was established in childhood. We learned how to survive. We know what to eat. We can clothe ourselves. We can clean ourselves. We can get to sleep and wake up and you know, and start the next day. Okay, we know how to do all these things, and that's our organic experience. So there's this world of organic experience what the subconscious manages, and there's this realm of social experience which the conscious mind manages. And the critical mind exists to protect our organic being from the deceptions and outright lies, or the deceptions and illusions, okay, of the social world, and contradictions and disappointments. That if we don't get that job, that promotion that we were looking for, and it's given to the guy that we feel most competitive with, the person we feel most antagonistic towards, they get that job. We don't just go lie down and die. Okay. We keep, we feel disappointment. We feel really maybe depressed for a while, but the body keeps on doing what it does and moves us forward and through. Okay. It's that kind of a thing. That's why that divide exists. It's done for our own benefit, but that creates this situation where there are these disconnects. And this is what our job is as hypnotherapists. This is the realm that we are blessed to operate in. The things that we can do to help people are so profound because we can get these two parts of the mind together. Okay, so we're talking about how important these are, these two concepts, these among the gifts that Kappas gave us. Okay, is this theory of mind, which leads directly into the ENP theory. Okay, and the stages of development. These are very, very important tools, not just in terms of analyzing the situation. And Amy, you were talking about avoiding kind of psychologicalizing, but we still do therapy. This helps us to guide conversation, and we see how the client reacts. We see what their suggestibility is to the information we're giving them. These tools help us to test their suggestibility, to changing the reactions which are causing them problems through conscious responses. Okay, so we're talking about a Kappasinian therapy. Empower the client to be more suggestible to their self, to that I that's out there in the world, okay? And that knows that the fact that I only want to eat hamburgers and French fries, okay, because meat and potatoes is what my mommy taught me was good for me, okay, that's causing some problems. We're getting some hardening of the arteries, and maybe things aren't working. We want that to get down into the subconscious, and the subconscious to accept that guidance. And this attains to all these parts of the personality: perception, interpretation, prioritization, and the reactions and responses that we execute. Okay, so the question is, if you think about the Kappasinian session structure, how is each of these things facilitated in the Kappasinian session structure? In terms of making the client more suggestible to their self. So let's start with perception. Who can come up with something about the Kappasinian session structure that helps people to be more perceptive about themselves? Okay, how about the progressive relaxation?
And how does that help them have more perception about themselves?
Because they are thinking, they are paying attention to every single part of their body.
Okay.
And feeling what it's feeling and saying relax or calm or loosen and unwind.
Got it.
I like to go through this whole thing of like, look at your palm. What do you feel? I don't know. Okay. Most people, when they look at their palm begins to tingle. So let's work on that. We want you to, because the subconscious is saying, oh, the conscious mind wants to do something with the hand. That's why it's looking at it. So let's send extra resources to the hand. That's all that whole psychosomatic stuff. Okay, it's the subconscious trying to help you along. Your best friend in the world trying to help you along. If they don't feel anything, okay, we want to get you connected to your body. Okay, so that's one way in which we make them more perceptive to themselves.
Okay.
Okay. You see what I'm getting at here? Okay, we talk with them about their experience. We can do this whole thin slicing thing in NLP. What happens first?
sorry.
What happened before that? Okay, back up a little bit more. So I've got a client tomorrow morning at 6 o'clock, and I'm going to ask her. Okay, she's got kind of generalized aching in her body. Okay, when the aching begins, is it preceded by an emotion? What's going on there? So there's this whole process of discovery, getting to be more aware of themselves. Now, how do we deal with interpretation in session? So they have these experiences. Okay, they see the soft serve cone, and they panic. Okay, how are they interpreting that soft cone, that soft serve cone? What's going on there? How are they interpreting the stimulus that they're given?
They might be interpreting it into love because that's what daddy gave them when they got
Right.
good grades, or mommy
Right.
gave them when they had a boo-boo.
Right, right. Or it could be that they were carrying a soft serve cone when the terrible auto crash happened. And so, you know, and so there's a negative association, okay? But it's looking at their triggers, looking at their symptoms, okay, and trying to figure out why are these happening? This is, if it's not working for them, it's a problem of interpretation. They're interpreting it the wrong way. So we go and we break this down in the cognitive discussion. In therapeutic imagery, you can take them down in a journey of discovery. Give me a symbol for your heartache. What does it look like? Well, it's like a web with a key stuck in it. Okay. So what's that all about? You know, trade places with it. How do you feel being with it? Trade places with it. Have it look at you for a while. What does it think about you? So let's understand and interpret this heartbreak. Let's not just feel it. Let's just not just perceive it. This is not a analyzing them or psychologizing or whatever the heck that word is. It's getting them using techniques is to where they can play with interpretation. Client that has low self-esteem. I know that they're going to hate me. Okay, why? Because of the way that they look at me. Okay, so what does that look? When do they look at you that way? When they first meet you? Okay, well, when you first meet somebody, how do you feel? I'm kind of curious about them. Okay, well, could that be what their look is? So it's all about interpretation. Priority is a big one. I've talked about this already, about emotional disconnect. So it's giving them permission then. Once they perceive that they have got this sense of guilt, allowing them to bring that out in their daily reality to understand how it affects their behaviors, how that functions in their daily reality, because it's going on underneath. It's bringing it out and making it a priority to pay attention to themselves. The US now. Okay, so we're going beyond this thing. You know, dream therapy is very much this way. Every night in dreams, your belief in whatever whatever resource state they've chosen to try to activate with themselves, your belief in your desire to manifest these qualities of courage and confidence will be accepted as desired and therefore true within you, and therefore inevitably real in the world. Your subconscious will accept that. This is the desire of the conscious mind, and this will serve you. And every night in dreams, you will dream about how these qualities can be manifested in the world to achieve your success. So you get the subconscious out of that defensive ruminative mode, that car crash happened, and I'm going to dream about that every night until I find some way out of it. Okay, you get it out of that defensive ruminative mode, and you give it some positive thing to focus on. So dream therapy shifts priorities in the subconscious mind. Another great gift of the Kappasinian tradition for our clients. Okay, and then processes. How do we change processes in therapy? Well, there's desensitization. Okay, instead of your heart rate going up, you let go of that. Okay, and you stay calm. Okay, there's habit formation. There's rehearsal in trance to prepare people for that test, so that the subconscious knows that context already. Okay, so these are all things that we're doing in therapy. These are all aspects in therapy. And I lay this out here, okay, in this way, because if you're having trouble changing processes, it may be because it's not actually a priority. They have fear of success. They don't want to complete that great project and have that huge contract because they're afraid that they're going to lose their family. So you got to go back and look at the priorities. And if the priorities can't be adjusted, then there's some interpretation going on underneath that. And if the interpretation can't be shifted, it's because there's some aspect of the situation that they're just not perceiving clearly. So we work through all these things. And this is very similar to NLP. Okay, if you look at Bandler and Grindler's model of the mind, okay, this is basically what it's all about. But it's just, again, I'm just laying this out in terms of the structure of personality, a little bit less rigid terms. Okay, in NLP, it's delete, generalize, and
Distort.
Yeah. Okay. All right. What time do we got here? Oh, well, we're already 8 minutes over. So again, going through this session structure, venting, getting them clear, dumping all the social context so they can focus on themselves. We're identifying reactions that aren't working for them. We're refining responses, getting agreement about what the responses should be. Hypnosis, we do this body scan to really connect into themselves. We dissolve the critical mind. And then we have our suggestions, which depotentiate reactions, activate responses, and we do dream therapy. And then we give them the homework of reinforcing experiences. Okay, so in terms of that I've laid out of personality and suggestibility, and working with the personality and identifying where we can make change, that suggestibility is about substituting responses for reactions. Okay, this is how I interpret the Kappasinian session structure. Okay, so I knew I was going to have too much material here today. What I promised was that we would have some discussion about some of the details of these tools. And what I needed to do is also so that now that I've got a definition of suggestibility, which I think encompasses the full scope of Kappasinian therapy, okay, there are certain uses of the word suggestibility that have got to be unloaded. We've got to find different terminology for them. Okay, and so what I will do, I will have a part B on this thing here, because it looks to me like you're all getting, the ones of you that I can see, it looks like you are very overloaded right now. I'm sorry. I hope it's okay.
And at least one of us is on the East Coast, so
Right.
It's getting late.
Right. So what I want to do is pause the presentation at this point in time. I'll schedule another one and maybe I'll have some other material to add on the end of this and go in a little bit more depth. I wasn't quite sure how long this was going to take, but let's get people who need to get off the air. I'll stop sharing, and then we can just open up the discussion for those that want to stay for a while. Okay, but thank you very, very much for spending time with me this evening.
Thank you. I don't want to leave because this is wonderful, but I feel like I'm on East Coast time. Just the very long day with my kids.
Right.
So I don't know. I think I have to go, but I don't want to go.
If you could just give me, how did this come together for you today? Is it kind of going in a useful direction?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, what I found really useful was the slide beforehand. I was actually writing it down, but I didn't quite finish. But I know it's going to be on your website, so
right.
I'll do it then. But yeah, I mean, I think you're obviously extremely intelligent. So I think it might, it's hard for me to kind of take in all of this right now because I'm just so overtired. I wish I'd been in a better state of mind, but I just feel like this is, it's very important to pretty much understand this very fundamental part of what we do, the suggestibility. I know that, you know, in the program, there's a lot of, there's a lot of confusion. I think if they were to change up the way they do things and put the E&P class in 101 with the suggestibility, they might not do that because they think they're going to confuse people, but I think they kind of have to do that because it does confuse people because E&P is referred to so often. So it's kind of important to kind of understand that whole foundation from the get-go.
Right. And if I was going to do that, I would just use more intuitive terminology.
Yeah.
I think that if you would just use more intuitive terminology, it wouldn't be such a big deal. It wouldn't be so hard. And the thing is that there'll be a view. There's a view graph a little bit later on in attachment theory, which is that there's also the need to understand neurotic behavior. And if you look at, if you just think that, there's this dichotomy between emotional and physical, and you're on this sliding scale between them, what happens is you get outside of the mid-range, like the middle 20%, and quite often people are neurotic. Okay, they will fight rather than change their self-concept. Okay, and you've got to work with that. You've got to deal with that. Okay, but if you're in the middle, usually what's going on is it's just you've got more competence in some areas than others. You've established your competency in a particular area, and so in that area you're outgoing and you let it all hang out. You let people see what you're doing, and in areas where you don't have that sense of confidence, you kind of hang back a little bit. You observe things and try to see what's going on and figure out how you can contribute.
Well, I think that's the beauty in E&P and learning about it. I mean, for most of us, for the first time in our lives. I mean, for me, I'm 44 and I'm learning about this for the first time, and it's. I don't remember who was it, Steve or someone who mentioned before how the changing the number and, I don't think it's not about changing so much as it is, as you've been talking about, responses and reactions. And for me, like being such a high phys, it was beautiful to understand the differences. This is also, regarding relationships. While I've been single for a million years, it doesn't matter because it still has such a profound effect and impact in my life. Because now I can see, oh, so that's why I'm this way, and that's why they're that way. And I think that's beautiful. Once you have that understanding of why someone is the way they are, you can see the beauty in it, and you can accept them for who they are and not want to change them. You can accept your beauty and your flaws, and not want to, and change yourself, but only because you see that it would be better for you and for them.
Right. Ultimately, there's later on down the road, might pull out the heuristic path. Okay, because what happens, Kappas, if you look at Kappas and you look at the evolution of personality that's kind of encoded in the chakras, He goes through the first 3 stages, okay, which is the concerns with survival, procreation, and exchange. Okay, getting resources, that's in your gut. That's the 3rd chakra, okay? And when you listen to him in his masterclass series, where he's talking about relationship therapy, and he's talking about teaching people that all that knowledge you have about your partner that you used to push their buttons and drive them crazy, you can use that to heal them. Okay? There's a turnover that happens at that point, and he was getting into the level of the heart chakra. He didn't have this framework, but the heart chakra is the chakra of healing. You stop competing with each other. You realize that, hey, I'm part of the problem. Let's just try to help this other person. And then what happens is that you get this choice now, eventually on down the road, which is, what if I don't want to be who my parents made me? I've got this person that's totally committed to my journey in life. And we've chosen that. And they will support me as I explore new aspects of my personality. And I can learn from them because they've already mastered all that. This person is now this wondrous asset. Okay, so when you talk about you're getting the parts of this in what you're saying, but that's something that I think that Kappas didn't quite get to the end of it. But the primary point, just to summarize for you, because I know you're getting exhausted, it's that this concept of suggestibility, of hypnotherapeutic suggestibility, as I defined it, organizes everything else in terms of the tools that Kappas provided to us. Okay, and it helps us to understand why they're important in terms of these concepts of compensation and things like that, okay? And while they're complicated and subtle, okay, they're also very important in terms of preparing the client to validate to the subconscious. Because the subconscious, when it gets to the point of that moment where they're going to have the experience and the new behavior is going to be manifested, it is going to stop and ask the conscious mind, is this what you want me to do now? There's always that moment of hesitation in that process. And if the conscious mind says yes, okay, then it goes running along down the road with you. Okay. So it's just this is just a way of understanding this. And what happens is now you get beyond the point of thinking about the client coming you with smoking cessation. They're susceptible to that, but they may smoke because they had an incomplete grieving for their mother. Okay, it's all about making them more suggestible to themselves in their current life and living life, a fulfilled life. Okay, and so we're seeing with this concept of suggestibility, as Kappas talked about it, I think this is why he was felt this to be so important, is that when you think in terms of modifying people's suggestibility, you're seeing the whole person, not the problem. Okay, and so that's why this is important to me. Yes, Laura, I'm sorry, I've been ignoring you.
No, but you've also been talking about some very valuable stuff too. So I'm just enjoying the whole thing.
Thank you.
So I kind of have 2 questions. One is a wondering and one is a question. But so the first question would be, are you trying to get somebody into more of like a level of closer to the 50-50? Is that what you're talking about? Like be more suggestible to self? Would that be more of like balance? Is that related? I mean, I don't.
So
I'm one of those people that graduated and never grasped the suggestibility thing.
Okay, so let me just get into this, because this has come up about how you shift suggestibility.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, as Kappas talked about this, it had to do with brain bilaterality. When you're born, the right side of your brain is pretty well developed. And its job is to find resources and threats in the environment. Okay. And it lets mommy take care of the arrangements to make sure that things work. Okay. Mommy's a lot more sophisticated machine. Okay. She can figure out what sequence things need to have. I just need to be aware so that if there's a threat, I can scream or cry and mommy will come, or if there's something there that mommy's giving me that's good for me, that I can take it in. Okay, it's just, and facial recognition is a big thing. Recognizing the mommy and the daddy is a big deal. Okay, or just happy faces in general. So the right side of the brain is turned on, but you're not doing any kind of sequential analysis. The right side of the brain is where our music center is. And what's interesting is we only have one music center. So when we're singing and somebody else is singing next to us, we don't make any difference between what's going on. We are processing what comes in and what's going out at the same time. So this is why singing is such a profound trigger for trance experiences. Music is so profound. Okay, that's why musicians get addicted to it. Okay, it's just that feeling like a single being. You're part of a larger being when you're playing music. That's part of what the psychology is there. Okay, now then what happens is that things don't always come out the way we want. Sometimes mommy doesn't show up when we scream. We might have to start figuring out, mommy's kind of self-involved. I need to do my business. At certain times I hear mommy coming into the room and she's making noises which are associated with her coming over to me. Okay, then I can do my business and mom will get me clean right away. Well, that shifts to the left side of the brain. The left side of the brain is all into sequencing. We have two speech centers, one receptive and one expressive. And to speak, you have to get things in the right order. You have to get sequences and processes going on, all on the left side of the brain. So what happens is that the Fizz personality type, everything's provided because the emo mom is making sure that everything's there and everything's taken care of. Okay, she's very meticulous and assuring that everything goes well for her little infant. Okay, and so the Fizz personality type just wants to explore the world. So they're right brain dominant. The emo personality type is more anxious. I got to plan things ahead. I got to figure out what mommy's going to, I got to anticipate what mommy's going to do next. Is she taking me on the roller coaster? Is there a bush I can hide under? Okay, you know, all these things that they have to anticipate and think about sequences and do this. So they tend to be more left brain. Okay, so when he was adjusting bilaterality, Kappas usually did this in situations where he was trying to get a Fizz to be more of an emo. Are the examples. So what you do is you got the crossover right between control. So you create message units in the left side of the body that goes to the right side of the brain. It gets blood flow going in the brain. The right side of the brain is active. Okay, and you get them to really imagine that situation and to really feel the sensations of that situation, which is causing them difficulty. And then you raise the right hand and clench the right hand and get message units going to the left side of the brain, okay? And you begin to talk about allowing the logical, rational process to begin to understand why this is happening, okay? And when that's fully, firmly established, then you lower the left hand and leave the right hand clenched and allow the rational process to have more influence over your experience of that situation. So what he's doing is he's shifting from the right side of the brain to the left side of the brain. Now with emos, I go the other way around, okay? Think of a place where you feel really comfortable. Now think of all the reasons why you're there, why you go there, why you go on your walk, why you go to the gym. Just do all the reasons why, okay? So now get them in trance. Okay, now see yourself in that situation. Start thinking of all the reasons why you go there. Okay, raise your right hand, get those reasons really strong in your mind, okay? And then begin to just let yourself perceive that environment, the colors, the sounds, and allow that to become stronger and stronger and stronger. And then lower your right hand and really be there with all of your senses. Okay, so the last step is, now that they can control this, put your hands in front of your chest like this and press them together. And then move them left and right before your chest and just let your mind go where it needs to go. That's right for the experience that you're having.
Okay, that's nice.
So what I'm doing is I'm not trying to shift their suggestibility in the Kappasian sense? What am I trying to do, Laura?
Well, their perception really.
I'm trying to give them control of their suggestibility.
Control, yeah.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
And every night, now that you can control this, every night in dreams, the subconscious will explore the possibilities that are available to you now that you can choose which part of your mind is most active in the situations that are important to you. And it will bring to bear those faculties. It will explore how to bring to bear those faculties which give you the greatest success and fulfillment in every situation. Right?
Nice. Yeah,
Okay.
I get it. Yeah. So,
but it's all built upon the brain bilaterality thing. And Kappas talks about
yeah.
how the artist is a somnambulist because they're having to use both sides of the brain in constant repetition. And one of the things that I've always had trouble with as a runner is that I get like, I wimp out all the time. And what I realized is I was thinking too much in my left side of my brain. I wasn't actually letting my right brain control the left side of my body. I was trying to make my right brain do what my left brain was doing on the right side of my body. So my left brain was in charge of everything. Well, I finally did this to myself and said, let my right brain run the left side of my body and stop thinking about what it's doing, comparing. I don't wimp out as much. I can run longer because I'm getting into trance. Every step.
Yeah. So are there any other ways, do you think, that people can do that? Or I mean, I know that that's the Kappasinian way that you've described and displayed, but I wonder if there's any other ways of doing that as well, you know, just like as a practice, or like you were saying, probably in self-hypnosis and repeating that exercise. Yeah.
Well, it's you know, what you can do is you know, there was this discussion about you know, finding an experience and trying to change the order in which you respond to it. Okay, going from you have a thought, an emotion, and a physical reaction, and trying to get people to reprioritize those. Kappas used to do this in public speaking. One of the most amazing therapies that he does is where he takes the client through the public speaking thing and gets to the end, and then you have at the end you have the relief and the satisfaction. And then what he does is he tells them to move the satisfaction in front of the anxiety.
I like that. I could use that.
So you can do things like that, but you've got to have an
Yeah.
anchor. You got to have an anchor in the process. And I forget how whether he had the two fingers, okay, and it was just an
Yeah.
ideomotor response where he wasn't really doing message units, building up lots of message units, but he had something that was left right in there, I think, where one was associated with the anxiety, and then one was the relief and the pride and accomplishment and everything like that. And he did the, you know, now we're going to put the relief and the accomplishment in front of the anxiety. And that was how he finished
I've
the therapy.
inadvertently worked on this, even like through somatic therapy, somatic experiencing, that kind of thing too.
Mm-hmm.
As far as being an emo, you know, so where you're, yeah, so that's interesting. Okay.
Well,
yeah, I grasp that a lot better.
Definitely the progressive,
Yeah.
okay, will move the emo towards the center, the high emo towards the center, because it's just increasing their ego sensations.
Yeah, body scans started doing that for me, you know, as an emo.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Right. So that just, wow, that like cleared up so much for me as far as so my other just little curiosity, I guess, wondering is, have you looked at anyways in terms of like personality and suggestibility at, you know, when I think of it, the way I learned it as a psych graduate, you know, it's just like through Myers-Briggs, you know, has anybody looked at that or thought about that or compared that with a Myers-Briggs personalities?
Okay, so the challenge that I
Or
have
too
with,
loaded of a question?
well, you know, I think that stages of development is bad enough.
Yeah,
There's
yeah, that's really good though. It's
So
good,
you've
yeah.
got like 16 different personality types, and there's 16
Yeah.
different partners you can have, and so now you got 256 behavioral patterns you got to figure out. I'm just like,
Yeah,
okay,
probably
give
too
me.
involved to, I
Enneagram.
mean,
Well,
Oh,
I
yeah.
think if I had, you know, the IBM's Watson are with me, I'd do just fine. I need a lot of assist. So Myers-Briggs is really strong. Myers-Briggs is great as a mechanism for exploring character. And so you know, I like the Scout Law, you know, in terms of character, you know, just giving people ideas, and so there's an aspect of this where we talk about having literacy about the things we do, the skills we develop, and learning languages that enable us to describe and communicate skills. And then the big deal now is emotional literacy and emotional intelligence, being able to talk about our emotions. Okay. But I think that there's a layer on top of that, which is a moral dialogue, which is built around virtues and vices. So this is a whole nother dimension of dialogue. And so I think that things like Myers-Briggs, you know, there's the DISC thing, which goes back to the ancient Greek humors kind of a thing about the 4 different personality types. The Scout Law has got a great list of virtues in it. I think that there's feminine graces that need to be explored and elaborated and described. I think that we're in a society right now where the heroes that women are, you know, the girls are being presented are very masculine in their characteristics. You know, and the feminine virtues are very, very special virtues. And I think they make women very effective politicians. And I wish that they would be highlighted and celebrated, you know. And so there's this whole level of dialogue, and this is where I do a lot of my work in terms of creating substitutes for defenses. It's identifying those virtues that you want to manifest in the world and beginning to really believe in them and put energy into expressing them, you know, that and having satisfaction in that. I had a client that I did pro bono for 30 sessions because she was in a real difficult financial situation, who had multiple serious childhood traumas, serious sexual trauma in adulthood, ongoing drug use, social conflict and manipulation in the family law system, including attorneys who betrayed her and ripped her off. Just all this stuff going on. We never talked about, we never went back to her traumas. We just focused on her virtues and just stayed with that, and got her to accept the light coming from above and validation from the highest source, and just allowing that, then projecting that into every part of her body, you know, and finally got into the reproductive system. And that was where the therapy ended, when she finally just cleaned herself out and got rid of all the darkness within her. We never talked about her traumas at all. So it can be very, very powerful for people to just accept light. What it turns out is that cause is only important in terms of depotentiating the reactions and creating the capacity for the conscious mind to assert different alternatives to the subconscious, to say that this is not part of our reality anymore. We don't need to do this. But the thing is that what the mind is really looking for is balance. It's looking for wellness and wholeness. And if you teach it how to do that, it doesn't care about the past. You know, it really doesn't. Bessel van der Kolk talks about a electroencephalogram therapy, where the woman puts electrodes all over the head and interprets the waveforms and sees what parts of the brain are underutilized and which are overutilized. And she puts up a little game on the screen with 3 spaceships flying around the course, and all the therapy is make the green one go faster. And that's linked to an underutilized part of the brain, or it's inversely linked to an overutilized part of the brain. And that is the freaking therapy. Just teaching the mind how to be in balance with itself. So we can do a lot more than that, in the sense that we can observe what's going on, the ab reactions and things like that. And so we can see when things are being released, and we can follow through and give reinforcement, in those very critical moments, as opposed to, that might not be picked up by the spaceships as they're flying around. So we can do a lot more than that. So don't get me wrong, but basically what they find is that once their mind knows balance again, it just wants to go ahead and be balanced. Yes, Emily.
In regards to her bringing up the Myers-Briggs, and I happen to just really love the Enneagram, if anybody's familiar with that, is there any value, to these given outside of the EMP? Like, is it useful for our clients to understand better their personalities, the different structures, the different,
different choices?
Yeah.
The different choices. Yeah, definitely. But the way that I would, the thing that I would try to avoid, okay, so like there's this thing going on now with the 5 factors of personality in the psychology community. And they say that one of them is extroversion, and they're deprecating introversion. Okay. And there's a book called Quiet going around now, which talks about the benefits of introversion. That an introvert goes into the space of ideas, and they need to do that. It's important to society for them to do that. They explore in a different dimension of reality, in the space of ideas. And they need to be allowed to do that. That all the great innovations always come from one guy sitting in an office. After the physicists go out and figure out what the world needs, one guy goes and sits in the office and figures out how to tie them all together in a neat little package, and then they build that, and that's what makes the money. All the great innovations happen that way. Just one guy.
What was the book? What was the name of the book?
Sorry. Quiet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice, because I was reading something about how even schools are, almost an influencer, or not an influence, but they're basically
normalizing extroversion.
Encouraging extroversion. Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And she talks about the cases in which introverts are willing to project themselves into the world and why that happens. And they can be very, very powerful agents for changing the world. And she talks about when that happens, because it happened in her own particular case. But the thing is, for me, it's just presenting people with the choices, and not trying to pound them into the square hole if they're a round peg and they don't quite fit. What I would treat all these things is, here's these dimensions of experience, of personality. Okay. And you may be this way in some situations and the other way in other situations. That's all fine. It's just, we need language. We need to put terms up in here into your self-concept, so that it can try to correlate those terms with your behavior and figure out what works in what situations and what works in other situations. Okay. That's what I think it's important to do with these things, is not to try to categorize people, but to fill their self-concept up with ideas that they can then use to negotiate their relationship with society.
Possibilities.
Right.
Is
because
that you can see on their own? Is that something, like, given the tools, what I've noticed even within this program, because again, I'm a high phys, so I'm social and I made a lot of friends, and I've just noticed that, some kind of different areas of people's lives where they tend to kind of put their issues they have from a social aspect kind of front and center, where people can see them, but they might not see them.
Right.
So I feel like, how does that apply to our clients? Are they kind of, sabotaging themselves, and kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy by kind of reacting this way towards people and kind of pushing them away, but not realize, like, I don't know how you would get someone to recognize their behavior, right? Their choices, but in a way where you're not giving them the answers, because we know that also doesn't work. We're not giving them the answers. They have to figure it out on their own. I don't know. It just seems so complicated.
Okay, so I will admit to being a little bit prescriptive here. Okay, I do have an overarching theme for all the work that I do. Okay, and I think we talked about this last time. But it's just that what makes us unique as human beings is the capacity we have to love. Okay, so in every situation where they talk about something, where they get into this rationalization and this neurotic self-justification, okay, I say, okay, so how does that empower you to love more effectively? What can you see in this situation but to help you to understand more clearly how to love, how to give and receive love? Because if you're not feeling fulfilled in this situation, but you're still there, there's something you expect to receive, but it's not being given to you. So how do you facilitate that? Or maybe it's not the right situation for you. Maybe these people aren't the ones that will love you. Maybe you need to find different people. But it all revolves around that, giving and receiving love. So if there's anything, any standard that I have, or any kind of like, soapbox that I get up on with my clients, that's the soapbox.
Thank you, Brian. I got to get going. I appreciate
You're welcome, Ali. Thank you for coming.
Thank
It is
Me
9:50.
too. I have to go and I don't want to, but I got to put my kiddos to bed.
Yeah.
Thank
all
you
right.
so much. This is my first talk by you, and I'm just loving it. So
Thank you, Laura. Well,
I'll be back.
I'm being
Thank you.
encouraged to do more. Thank you for being here, Isabella.
Yeah.
All right,
I'd
well,
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
if you could send me any kind of thoughts that you have, Isabella. You've been very quiet tonight, but I'd be really glad to hear
That's
whatever.
because I'm the emo.
Okay. Well, that's why I'm asking. After you've had time to
both.
process it, I'd love to hear whatever you've got to offer. All right, everyone.
All
Have a
right,
great
Thank you,
night.
Brian.
You're welcome.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.